Hey there, cats and kitties. I am the Blues Man, Johnny Blues, and with this video I'll be discussing my thoughts on Zack Snyder's Superman film, Man of Steel, which was a film I was greatly anticipating, I have to say, being a lifelong Superman fan. He was the first superhero. He was my first superhero, and he would be, for all time, the topmost of all of them to me. He has his detractors, but they're wrong when they call him boring or too powerful or whatever else, as far as I'm concerned. And without him, quite frankly, they'd never have gotten whatever heroes it is that they so admire and consider better. In my approach to discussing this film, I'll forgo any synopsis and suggest that you go out and see it for yourself if you haven't already, as personal experience is key in seeing and engaging a film like this. But I will say in a nutshell, it begins with that age-old classic tale of a boy alien being sent to our world through the destructive fate of his own and the compassion and hope of his parents. And through soul-searching and the threat of the mutual destruction of his adopted world, does he find himself to be a hero and a beacon and symbol of hope for all mankind. I'm going largely to be looking at the cast of key players in the film and the particular scenes that they contributed memorable and or surprising performances, at least to me. Things that will not be easily forgotten and that will greatly fuel my desire to see the film again as soon as I can. Beginning in a loosely chronological order, I'll talk about Jor-El as portrayed by Russell Crowe. Crowe managed to embody the archetypal Jor-El to me, in the appearance of his being a great and compassionate intellect, the fate of his world being of the utmost importance to him. But also do we find that this Jor-El was a great warrior and soldier. When confronted by General Zod's murderous coup, Jor-El pretty much hands Zod his ass. What really came to surprise me, though, was Jor-El's recurrent appearances all through the film, almost to the end of it, beyond his death at Zod's hands, as a sort of echo or ghost AI. I love that his presence was an integral piece to the puzzle of besting Zod, who is arguably as much a nemesis to himself as he would later become to Jor-El's son. Kal-El's mother, too, I felt, was very well represented by actress Ayelet Zurer, her compassion and fears for her son being effectively displayed as she pleads for Jor-El to forgo sending the boy away. And in the wake of Jor-El's death, do we see that she is a woman of great stoic reserve and courage, keeping her place even as Zod threatens her that he will find her son, which is only exceeded by the resignation that all is lost for her doomed planet of Krypton, as she admits Jor-El successfully predicted, and she confronts her end by looking it right in the face, which was truly tragic and astounding to me. But once Kal-El comes to Earth, he is adopted by Jonathan and Martha Kent, as we've come to expect, as portrayed by Kevin Costner and Diane Lane, respectively. And I like that these sequences were set largely in flashback, as the grown Clark Kent is on a journey of self-discovery throughout the film. In his mother, we see another strong matriarchal presence, as when she too is confronted with Zod, a super powerful alien terrorist by degrees, she too holds her own, standing toe-to-toe with him. And I have to say, while it was a small moment, I loved when Superman returns to see that she's okay. One of the first things she says to him is, "Nice suit." This was a classic moment to me. Jonathan, though, was something of a surprise to me, in his being truly conflicted about his boy's abilities and when it would be the right time to show them. His considerations are absolutely authentic to a situation that, if real, would potentially bring about all manner of heinous repercussions, even to those not immediately affiliated with the situation. Jonathan was awed by his son. In him you could see that his affection went beyond any concept of a lack of familial bond. Yet even in the face of his own mortality did he wish for Clark to wait out, revealing himself. Sensing such monumental conflicting emotion in his son, he wished only that Clark could find himself before making that leap, and it was a reserve that ultimately made Jonathan meet his end. It was certainly a new twist on an old scheme, and one that was truly compelling to me. I can see the debate waging for time immemorial. Was his sacrifice out of love and compassion, or fear and worry for the world that surrounded them? But whatever your take on that, suffice to say, where Kal's and Clark's parents are concerned, they were effectively and well represented by the actors cast in those roles, and I couldn't have been more pleased by that. What comes next are the allies and antagonists, beginning with several of those on the military side. Taking a look at Swanwick, as portrayed by Harry Lennix, I felt you had a perfect foil in a not-too-antagonizing way for Superman. My favorite scenes between the two being when first they held a discussion from opposite sides of the glass partition in the interrogation room, and later on in the film when Superman crashes one of the military's drones sent to scope out his abode, and he lays down the law that the trust, if there is to be any between them, needs to be earned and mutual. I also found quite funny Christina Wren's line toward the end of that scene as Major Carrie Ferris that she just finds him kind of hot, making herself something of a comparable foil for Swanwick, but posted on the opposite end of the spectrum. From there, we have to look at Christopher Maloney's Colonel Hardy, who was, for me, a big surprise, in that there was a lot of speculation that his character was going to be a villain of sorts, and while there's a sense of his being against these alien invaders and terrorists, which seems for a while to include Superman himself, it was with a great sense of satisfaction to see that, in answer to Superman saving Hardy from Feora, he'd seen the good that Superman truly represented, marked by his command given to his squad that this man is not our enemy. I got a chill of satisfaction at that, I have to say. Another greatly impressive turn of performance was Richard Schiff's Emil Hamilton, which came for me at a point toward the end of the film as his curiosity turned to courageousness as he fitted the Kryptonian key to Kal-El's crib ship, if you will, into its drive to arm it as a warhead of sorts. The man had no way of knowing whether he'd live or die by doing so, but of course the whole world was about to die right there in front of him. So he leapt into the fray and earned a great amount of respect for me, as roles like this are often ones who end up cowering and skulking away, setting up the scene for another potential hero instead. And there was a similar example of these heroics to be found in Perry White in the film, as portrayed with tremendous class and pathos, which I predicted it would be back when I posted my reaction to his being cast by Lawrence Fishburne. In a scene I will not soon forget, Perry and two other Daily Planet representatives were being inundated by the gravitational shocks of Zod's planet-modifying megaship, with buildings toppling all around them as they tried to run for cover. There was a point when the female of the two, Jenny, was trapped in a heap of rubble, and Perry and the other guy tried with all due diligence to free her before their fates were inevitably sealed. Most of all, in her terror, Jenny didn't want to be left alone, and Perry promised her he wouldn't leave her, which he didn't. In fact, there came a time when it looked like all was lost, and the gravity shocks were inching closer and closer, at which point Perry extended his hand to her. She clasped onto it eagerly, and he didn't look away from her. In his eyes, you could see what he was thinking. We're about to die here, and you won't be alone. We're in this together. I watched that scene just absolutely in awe, mouth agape. It humanized Perry White in a way that has never been done so before on screen for me. It absolutely exceeded all of my expectations, putting it mildly, and I love it. Taking a turn to look at the polar opposite of that, and I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly, was Anj Trao's Feora, as a beautiful and lethal force to be reckoned with. Every scene she was in, her entire performance, absolutely astounded me. From her cunning engagements with Superman to her smirking confidence in her attempts at killing Hardy. Feora was, for lack of a better analogy, the Boba Fett or Darth Maul of Man of Steel. As much as we saw of her, I wanted to see more, and my fingers are left crossed for a Phantom Zone survival and an appearance in the sequel. And the man she followed devoutly, General Zod, as portrayed by Michael Shannon, was no slouch either. He was a man filled with rage and contempt for the political assignation of the Kryptonian Council, and their backwards, in his estimation, way of running things, provoking his terrorist coup. But it was without a doubt what he forced Superman, a force for good, to do to put an end to his reign of terror that will likely go down in history as a point of intense debate for fans and average filmgoers alike. Superman must kill Zod to silence his lethal fury, to save innocence. And it is with an intense agony that Superman does this. It's the last thing he would ever do, but he wasn't given a choice, by a man who was self-righteously determined to either meet his end or save his race by culling an entire world. Just absolutely compelling to see this unfold on screen. And the Kryptonian race as a whole was fascinating to me as well. We've seen some similar tropes depicted in the comics, depending on the history you follow, but it was well and truly a world of its own, with intriguing statutes where it pertained to regulated birth control and such. How Zod could be so compelled to follow this example was absolutely confounding. But their technology and the other life existing on their world was just an amazing sight to see. It greatly awed me. But getting to one half of the two primary players in the film, that is, Amy Adams' Lois Lane, we were given a competent go-getter who would thrust herself willingly into the thick of it in pursuit of the truth, and not in a way that would leave her to be a damsel in distress by any stretch of the imagination. She was a woman of her own accord. She could take care of herself, and even became an integral part of the efforts to take down Zod through the ghostly aid of Jor-El. Her romance, if you will, with Superman was portrayed in a realistically evolving way, her awe and wonder being understated, and her compassion and empathy being at the fore. When she goes to Perry with the news that she's backing off of the story, it shows her to be an honorable woman as well, not merely any sort of bloodthirsty journalist. She cares, and for this I cared about her and their unfolding relationship. And it's whom she cared about that this movie was about at its core. Let me start off by saying very simply and very plainly, Henry Cavill is, in bold letters, Superman. He could no better have embodied that role than he did here for any changes. He wasn't brooding, but soul-searching. He wasn't cocky, but confident. He wasn't salacious, but charming. He was a man who grew up learning to rein in his frustration, to rein in his abilities. And I particularly loved, just as it was for the Superman of the comics, that his flying came through an evolution of sorts, beginning with giant leaps and ultimately leading to an orbital pass just above the Earth. Clark was well represented by all of the actors playing him herein, marking the different ages at which we see him. I can fault none of the actors involved. And what's more, I could absolutely believe they were all the same person. And it would really be hard for me to pin down any one scene to point to in Henry's portrayal of Superman that outdid any other. From his Smallville battles with Faora and her brood, to his charming discussions with Lois in the interrogation room, to his heart-wrenching dilemma as posed by the beliefs and fears of his father, and the thanks he gives Hardy in answer to Hardy's making it known that he isn't a threat to the world. It would defy any logic to my thinking to compare Supermans, but people do it anyway, from Kirk Alyn to George Reeves, Christopher Reeve to Dean Cain, Tom Welling to Brandon Routh, and all of them to Henry Cavill. But what I will say is that the best elements, those traits that I so admire as displayed by the Man of Steel, were absolutely well embodied in Cavill's performance. And this was, I have to admit, an interpretation that I found to be better than most others. Christopher Reeve's Superman being the closest in relation to being near to equal in its interpretation of the character, though with the stark difference of one being surrounded more so by camp and humor, and the other a more realistic and empathetic world. But I'll go back to my earlier statement. Henry Cavill is Superman by the end of this film. In fact, he's Superman all through it. I can't put it any plainer than that. And I hope he will continue to be Superman for a long time to come. I was also greatly impressed with the eschewing of that age-old trope of Lois Lane doesn't know Superman is Clark Kent, and the way it was handled in the film. It's a one-note joke, and it isn't as effective as it once was, so omitting it entirely was a congratulatory decision, to me at least. Now, before I conclude my discussion on what was, to me, just an absolutely brilliant Superman movie, I'd like to note that I've heard some gripes made about the movie as being either too actiony, or without having a memorable score, or having forgettable characters, etc. And what I would say to that is that it's largely unfounded. And as to the score, just listen to Hans Zimmer's Man of Steel main theme or the track Flight from the OST and tell me those are forgettable. I don't believe you need to be a Superman fan to enjoy this movie, but by and large, it is my estimation that it is those who have a dislike for the character that are the ones who are largely in conflict with this film. Those and those who are fans but have a very limited view on what interpretation of Superman they prefer. And one of the things I hear most commonly from those who say they are such fans is that Superman has been irreparably changed. No, he hasn't. You're just unaccustomed to the different interpretations of the world's greatest superhero that have been. The things you see done in this film have been done before, better in some places than others, but what's miraculous about Man of Steel is that it took all the best and most effective and compelling of those elements and brought them all together for one grand opus. You may say that this was a darker, more brooding Superman, but it wasn't. You may say that this was a darker, more Christopher Nolan-esque take on the world of Superman, but it's not. Sure, I can see where his minor influence is in effect, that being that we're finally dealing with Superman as if he were a real thing, as if he'd appeared in a real world. And from his powers and abilities, to his personal quandaries, to his finding himself and finding a reason to come out into the sunlight as the protector he's been since he was born, to his empathy and honor, it was all the Superman I know and have loved since I was a child. But one I can appreciate more now as an adult, being he's being dealt with in a way that legitimizes him, that makes what he stands for real and relatable. And I have to ask, what promise is there to come for this man of tomorrow? Well, I definitely have to acknowledge those LexCorp tanker trucks that we see during the battle of Superman and Zod toward the end of the film. If that wasn't a taste of the future, I don't know what else is. Then there's the speculation of Kara, otherwise known as Superman's cousin Supergirl, potentially being alive somewhere on Earth. And Snyder would do well to cast perhaps Emily Browning in the role, as she kicked a hell of a lot of ass in Sucker Punch, even down to a few precursor moves to Superman's in Man of Steel. And then there's the intriguing aspect of how they'll reinterpret the Clark Kent side of his personality. I'm really hoping they'll utilize a Kryptonian tech remedy to explain away why his simply wearing glasses keeps people from recognizing him as Superman. The world ahead from here looks grand in scope, with endless potential, and a potential Justice League film sits on the horizon as well, to boot. It's with all due excitement that I greatly anticipate its next chapter. And I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments below what you thought of Man of Steel if you've seen it. Otherwise, that'll be it for me on this one. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll catch you all later. Peace.